Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of EdTalks. And not unusual, I have another friend, and that's been the coolest thing. Obviously, serving in healthcare is everyone is so well intentioned and just good people. So it's always easy to make friends. And Vic, you're definitely one of them. And I am so appreciative of our relationship. But welcome to EdTalks.
Thanks, Ed. Happy to be here. Always a pleasure talking to you.
So, Vic, you and I first met. I showed up at New York City Health and Hospitals as a CIO, and you were the CISO.
That's right.
And I just remember what I really appreciated about you. You were all about the business. You were all about the healthcare, the clinical business and the revenue business. And you just happened to be the CISO. And I love that approach. How did that happen? I was just curious, how did you get to that mindset?
I think it all happened quite organically. I used to be a consultant prior to joining Health and Hospitals, and they were one of our clients. But Health and Hospitals, as you know, it's like the largest healthcare in the country, public healthcare, very mission, purpose driven, providing care for people who cannot afford care otherwise. Without you have, whether you have insurance or your legal status, everybody gets the same medical care. So I think the purpose and the mission I was very much inspired by. So from day one as a CISO, I always wanted to know how we can do more for the population whilst being very conscious about the taxpayers' dollars. So I think it just happened. That's what drew me to healthcare and specifically health and hospitals. So I always wanted to learn, and I think that allowed me to influence cybersecurity decisions accordingly as well.
Yeah.
I'm glad you picked up on it, but
Yeah.
yes.
I know I didn't mean to jump right in, but I had that memory like when we first met, and I was like sort of taken aback because up until that point, my CISOs had been more of the traditional kind that were very excellent at their craft, and it was like all these rules, like no, 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 where you were like, hey, how can we make this happen that keeps us secure in the business flowing and the experience? So that was really cool. So yeah, so I got to back up here a little bit. So that's how we first met, though. You're a CISO in healthcare, but recently, and we're going to unpack this just in a little bit, but recently you left healthcare. So tell us about what you're doing today.
So now I'm working as the CISO with Burlington Stores. It's an off-price retail, a Fortune 500 company, and I've been there for less than 4 months.
Yeah. And I shop a lot there. So now I know, hey, I know someone there. Yeah, that's pretty cool. But before we get there, you're a fascinating person. Tell us about you're married and have a couple kids. Tell us about your family.
Yeah, so I've been married for almost 19 years now. Glad my wife's not here. She'll correct me. I'm probably off by a year here or there. I got two kids, 10 and 5, fifth grader boy and a first grader daughter, and we live in Jersey. So yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. I've been to your home and your family's just lovely. And the other thing that we have in common, in addition to having awesome wives and kids, is climbing. So I remember out of the blue, you're like, Ed, I'm going to Everest Base Camp. So tell us a little bit about your climbing history.
I don't know. It's always trying to do something new, maybe call it midlife crisis or whatever, and you want to beat that aging mindset. About 4 years ago, my best friend and I, we decided to do something different. And out of the blue, he suggested, hey, let's go to EBC. I didn't even know what EBC was. But just because he was asking, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. It was Everest Base Camp. And we had such a great experience, 14 days of hiking, climbing, being in the nature. We decided to make it a ritual. So after that, we did Kilimanjaro, and then we're planning our next hike next year. Thankfully, COVID hit after Kilimanjaro, and it gave us a breather. But now we're back to climbing, and hopefully we do another one. You climb yourself. I think you've inspired me a lot too. I didn't know after I did ABC, I knew you had done a bunch of hikes, and you quite enjoy that as well, right?
Yeah. We still hike, climb quite a bit, but Everest Base Camp's always been on my list. We almost did it. I forget what happened. Simmer and I, we almost did it. Something came up, so I don't know if we're going to get back to it, but we might. But yeah, you inspired me on that one for sure. Yeah, so let's talk about going from healthcare to retail because oftentimes we see people going the opposite direction. So I would love to learn. Tell us a little bit about why you took this opportunity, and then I want to compare and contrast. Like, what can healthcare learn from retail and vice versa?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. And you're so right that usually we see people going from retail to healthcare. I mean, maybe because we were in healthcare, so we only saw people coming in. And when they left, we didn't know where they went, but you're right. So I've had the privilege to work with at least two chief digital officers during my 12-year tenure as a CISO in healthcare. And without fail, the CDOs would always come from the retail sector. I mean, either it would be somebody from Nike or some they would bring people from Disney or like Saks of Fifth. So they were all see, and then the main thing was that hey, healthcare is very good at providing care, but not necessarily providing a good experience. So when you want to provide an experience that patients or customers can remember, you want to tap into talent from retail and hospitality. So I think that's why we see people coming in. And the other thing was that whenever we needed to, like, population health has been a huge topic for the past 10 years or so in healthcare with the advent of AI, cloud, and data. So data analytics has been huge, and that's what kind of fuels retail in my 4 months that I've seen that like that is the engine that fuels retail. At my current company, there's a saying, every problem here is solved with a data analytics report. So that's how they run the business. So I think those were the two main reasons that I wanted to kind of double click into how to improve patient experience, customer experience, and how to leverage data more efficiently and effectively. And I thought when we're getting those people to solve our problems, looks like they've solved it in their world. So that's the reason I was looking at retail, and yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah. So I do want to compare and contrast, but before we get there, do you think, and maybe it's not a fair comparison, but do you think retail takes cybersecurity more or less critical than healthcare? Is it the same?
It's definitely not the same. So I'll answer it two ways. One is from a personal standpoint, like like I said, like again, being in healthcare as an executive for 10 plus years, I wanted to figure out, and I love cybersecurity, by the way. So for me, it's next level is not to become a different C-level person. I wanna keep doing cyber. Maybe I'm limiting myself or not, but that's what I love. So in order to expand my cyber perspective, I thought changing the sector would be a good perspective. From all of a sudden going from HIPAA to SEC, most healthcare in US is non-profit and non-public with the exception of a few. So going to a public company, getting exposed to SEC regulations would be a good perspective. Going to a more regulated place in terms of PCI and SOX and financial accounting, that would be a good learning for me. So that was the personal motivation. And to answer your question, whether cyber is different, yes, it totally is different. Nothing is more important than human life. So that mission and the ability to negatively or positively impact, I don't think there's anything better than that. However, the velocity and the focus on bottom line is significantly higher in a public company. I think
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people are more conscious about how they spend in retail, but in general, the structure lends itself to a relatively higher accountability.
Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. So what would you say? So I'll ask this question from the two perspectives. So what can healthcare learn from retail? And you may have already sort of foreshadowed some of that. And then we'll do the flip side. So the first one is, what can healthcare learn from retail? And I know you've only been 4 months in, but I imagine you have a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, I think three things bubble up for me, and those have been learnings for me as well. And the first and foremost is financial accountability, making sure that there is return on investment on every dollar that is spent. And again, I'm not saying that it's not done in healthcare. I do feel like it's done a little better in a public company with a more focus on bottom line. And again, the focus is not bottom line in healthcare. So again, but that's a learning. The second is creating influencing patient or customer. I'm going to use those terms interchangeably because of my situation. Influencing your stakeholder behavior in line with your brand. I think in healthcare, people still look at all hospitals as equal, with the exception of a few. Most people just go to a nearby hospital for the right reasons. So there's no sense of brand as much as it is in retail. When you're shopping, the first thing you start off with a brand. I want to go to top tier. I want to go to off price. Where do I want to be? So using your brand to influence customer behavior is a huge opportunity for healthcare. And the other two I touched upon. I think the focus on experience is fairly evident. We provide great care. but not necessarily in the most conducive environment, whether it's digital or on-prem. Influencing that behavior is never a focus. And then the data piece I talked about. And I think that those are the few themes that I think where healthcare can learn from
Yeah.
retail.
No, those are really good. And as you share them, I can definitely see that perspective. What about what retail can learn from healthcare? So what sort of things, what are a couple things that you're bringing to the role that they didn't have before because, you have this great healthcare background?
Yeah, I think that's kind of why they were interested in me as well, because of my experience being in a very regulated and a mission critical environment. So obviously, the regulations are changing for public companies with SECs, the 10K disclosures, and the cyber incident disclosures. They want companies to disclose their incidents within 3 days. And it's very, very difficult to quantify the impact of something that is evolving within 3 days, but they do allow you to iterate it. So they wanted somebody who's operated in a mission critical environment, primarily because if you're implementing cybersecurity, I hate to say it, but not sometimes it does include friction. So they want to make sure that you can introduce cyber in a manner which doesn't cause any disruption. So if you've done that in healthcare, you probably can do it in retail, because in healthcare, a disruption means impact to patient care, not just impact. I think that mission critical of doing cyber in a mission critical environment and then being in a heavily regulated environment, which is where retail and other sectors are going, were the two things where I think retail or general, not as regulated industries can learn from healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good points. Yeah, and it made total sense. Vic, I want to ask you one last question, and I know you're very early in your tenure, but based on your 4 months, would you recommend for not just CISOs but any professional, but let's just keep it to the C-suite, so that they get this experience in multiple different industries as opposed to just.
I think it's a very personal question, and my dad always used to say that what you know is as important as what you become. So I think it's driven by your personal motivation. For me, I wanted to learn, and at this point in my career, switching industries is not easy. I mean, after you're a veteran in some industry for 20 plus years, you want to kind of double down on it. But I think it's a very personal choice. You can always benefit from wider perspectives, but if you don't really are in it to learn, you may not enjoy the disruption as much. I wanted to pivot to accelerate. I think I heard that in one of your previous shows, and that really resonated with me. And that's when I look back at my decision and this trajectory, that's what I think I'm trying to do. And hopefully it works out. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
so
I'm
I'm
sure
not
you'll
sure.
be. No, you'll be successful in any industry because of who you are as a person and the skill sets that you bring in your work ethic. So yeah, I from a logical point of view, it seems that it would benefit individuals in all sectors. The more of these
Yeah.
experiences you can have, you bring these learnings over, and it just gets better. And you can always come back. So that's my hope for Vic. Is I'm glad you're learning and taking and helping on the retail side and learning from them. And maybe one day you'll come back to healthcare because we need awesome people like you. But, anyways, super fascinating, Vic, catching up with you and learning about your transition to Burlington and then the whole retail, healthcare, what we can learn from one another is super great. I'll leave you with the last word. Any other thing that you might want to share about your experiences?
So I think I'll just double click on what you were saying, that I think the worlds that we live in are converging very rapidly thanks to technology. It has gone from being a glue to actually being the fabric of any organization. Thinking again about what you were asking, I think it makes sense to have that wider perspective so you can be mindful of different stakeholders while you're making any decisions. The only other thing I would say is thanks for having me here. I still get FOMO from not being in healthcare, and I welcome the opportunity to connect with a healthcare colleague and a leader and somebody like you, Ed. So thank you for
Well,
that opportunity.
I'm still keeping you in my healthcare bucket. So whenever I'm out to the city, out your direction, I'll be inviting you to all my healthcare events. So you can't get too far away. Hey, Vic, thank you for being a guest on EdTalks.